after a few years of it, I was like, man, I want to go back and play football really bad. My brother was a starting receiver at LSU, and I figured I could try to go help LSU, and I wanted to see if I could do it anyways. It was just another challenge.
All right, welcome to Willing to Fail. I'm your host, Peyton Bennett, and today is a very special guest. He was the former 5th overall pick in the MLB draft, a World Series champion, and if that's not enough, he was also a former NFL quarterback. Today's guest is Josh Booty. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Man, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me, Peyton. I was looking forward to doing this with you, man. This will be fun.
All right, so you've pretty much lived every kid's dream of being a pro athlete, and you did it twice. You're a professional baseball player and a professional football player. So I want to kind of start from the beginning in your upbringing. All right. So you were born, and correct me if I'm wrong, of course, you have pretty athletic parents. Your mom was a cheerleader. Your dad was a quarterback.
Yeah.
Grew up with some, or I guess you were the oldest, so you had some brothers. How much of your athletic success would you attribute to just good genetics, and how much of it would you attribute to like the environment, the competitive environment you were in, especially in like growing up in Louisiana where there's not really shit else to do?
I'd say 50-50. I mean, that's a great question, actually. My dad was a coach, athletic director. He was instrumental big time. I mean, even, he would take me to the ballpark because he played like slow pitch softball at like the highest level, which isn't professional or anything like Major League Baseball, but they traveled every weekend and played slow pitch softball. My dad was an awesome quarterback. He was an SEC quarterback at Mississippi State, and he'd never played in the NFL. But so after he got done playing, I was born a few years after, and man, we were at the ballpark almost every night. So I was like the bat boy, kid running around. Watch out, don't get in the way of the runners and all that stuff. For the guys in the dugout, don't mess with them too much. Like, I was just that kid. I always wanted to be around the game. And, both my parents are very athletic, and I do have an athletic family. I have 2 other brothers that played major college football. Another was a state player of the year in high school football in Louisiana. So all 3 of my brothers were very, very good football players. I enjoyed baseball growing up because I guess my dad was always at the ballpark. It wasn't the football field. So it was always the ballpark. And I really loved just, shagging fly balls and doing that when I was a kid. And I just grew in love with baseball. So all the way up until my junior, senior year in high school, baseball was always my favorite.
Gotcha. Okay. So, and you also, you grew up near, or your dad had a good relation with Terry Bradshaw, right? So
yeah. That's it. Yep. So I grew up in a town called Shreveport, Louisiana, and that's where Terry's from. And his family's very close to Shreveport's small. So, you get to know a little bit about the people that grew up before you. And he actually graduated from the same high school as my father. He was 4 or 5 years older. Joe Ferguson came behind Terry Bradshaw, and he had a 17-year NFL career with the Buffalo Bills playing quarterback in the 70s and 80s. And he was in the lineage of quarterbacks at the high school that they went to. So it was Terry Bradshaw, Joe Ferguson, and then my dad, and they were all Americans. So that's how my dad grew up, with good coaching. Those guys hanging around, showing them how it's done. So, yeah, I've developed a relationship with Terry through the years. Terry's brother Craig was a great quarterback, 6'7" quarterback, played in the NFL for the Oilers. Nobody even knows about that, really.
I didn't know that.
Especially you young guys, it's like, so he, in the 80s, 70s and 80s, Craig Bradshaw was in the NFL too. So Terry had a brother that played in the National Football League. So, but we all grew up across the street from one another. Craig lived 2 doors down, Terry's brother, and we would always see him. So it was fun.
Dang. So you were definitely surrounded by like good influences and people to look up to and learn from. So was there a certain point like in your young sports career that you realized like that you were kind of head and shoulders above all your peers?
Not until I was like a 10th grader. I really didn't know what to expect because I didn't have any older brothers. My dad started a high school with another gentleman. They actually launched the high school that I went to, Evangel Christian. So I went to play for my dad and another gentleman named Denny Duron at this high school, Evangel Christian. And they wanted me to play football. I wanted to really just play baseball in high school, and they really I guess they did enough to lure me to play football and be the quarterback, and they knew I had a strong arm, and they let me throw the football, man. And that's what really changed a lot in my mind was there's nothing better than, Friday nights, Saturday nights or Saturdays and Sundays, man. It's just, in the South, the fan bases are so strong. And, I ended up playing at LSU, which is an amazing place to play. But even at the high school level, we were doing some things that other people weren't doing. We broke national records and we set it on fire and won state titles and really rewrote a lot of the history books throwing the football. And so some of my best moments or proudest moments are high school football, and I guess how we did it. We did it through the air, which no one was doing back when I was in high school.
Yeah, so. I mean, not only were you doing football and baseball, but you were playing basketball too. So what's obviously from football, you can see like people like Patrick Mahomes or Russell Wilson or Kyler Murray, like using all these different arm slots, which is like a good advantage. What else did you take from like other sports that you used in another sport?
A lot of that. I played point guard as a freshman on the varsity basketball team and sophomore year. So I just got to compete a ton because I was at a small school. I started as a freshman in all three sports, which is crazy. And then you just got a lot of experience, man. I was a shortstop, the quarterback, and the point guard on the high school team as a freshman. And it's like, you better know what you're doing a little bit or you're going to get embarrassed, So I grew up fast in that regard in terms of just competing. And then I had my dad and those guys coaching me up, man, and it was fun. But yeah, in terms of those athletes and what they do on the football field now, like I would have loved to be in a system like they have now with the RPO, the spread. What we saw at LSU last year was so phenomenal with Joe Burrow. And of course, he's going to be a good pro too. And you just see the offenses progressing, especially in high school and college now. And we were able to run the spread back in high school, but no one else was doing it. Now it's gone all the way up to the NFL, and it's so much fun to watch.
Yeah, it's definitely changed a lot. And so I'm sure you would probably encourage like younger kids who are playing multiple sports to keep playing multiple sports, or would you encourage people to like specialize?
Yeah, I have twin boys and they're 15 years old and they're both freshmen and they're both starting for the high school varsity football team. One's a quarterback, one's a receiver. And my son, who's the quarterback, is living exactly the same thing I did. So, I encourage those guys to play other sports as long as they can. It's so hard now because these kids, they play so many baseball games in the summer, and the AAU takes a lot out of them too if they play basketball. We didn't have all that back then. We didn't even have 7-on-7 tournaments and the things that kids have nowadays. It wasn't year round. It was just you play your 20 games, and in baseball you play your 15 games if you can go all the way. In football now it's just so different. So I kind of got to give them a break, every once in a while, because they can't play a game every day of their lives, and you can't run around, play 80 games in the summer baseball, but they really love football, and I'm happy.
Yeah, that's gotta be amazing. I mean, just the chemistry between a quarterback and receiver is always so important. I can't imagine for twins doing that. That's gotta be something else.
Yeah, it's fun for them, I tell you that, and they're both very good for their age. So we'll see how that pans out. But they love to play and work together on the football field, and they do understand what each other's doing or thinking, which is a big advantage.
Yeah, best of luck to them. I'm interested to see where they continue to go.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
So for your story, you were coming out of high school towards the end of your senior year. You're a top recruit, maybe the top recruit in football, coming from a good family of like with good genes. But then not too far from you was another quarterback that had pretty good genes. He was doing pretty well. So I guess it was you and Peyton Manning that were top recruits in Louisiana, or maybe you were even above him.
Yeah, I think he won Gatorade National Player of the Year, and I was USA Today National Player of the Year. So, we split awards nationally, which was kind of cool because, it was before Peyton was Peyton, of course. We knew Archie. My dad knew Archie, his dad, and we knew Peyton was going to be a good player because he was 6'4", 6'5". He was so lanky in high school. but you could tell. I mean, the guy knew what he was doing, and Eli came right after him too. And I remember watching him in high school, and Cooper, their brother, was good as well. I mean, they're in South Louisiana and we're in North Louisiana, and we're in different divisions, so we never had to play them. But in terms of just pure recruiting, we were the top two guys that year. I don't even think anybody was close to us in terms of just the rankings and stuff.
Yeah, that's crazy. Now maybe your son will be competing with like Cooper Manning's
Yeah.
son, like, or Archie.
Maybe
So the story
he
repeats
will.
itself.
Yeah. It's crazy how life repeats itself. I've watched Arch Manning some video, and he looks good. And my son's already 6'1", 190. He's a freshman. He looks good, and I think he's going to be a big-time college player too. So it's going to be fun to watch those guys kind of grow up. And Arch is 1 year ahead, but it's going to be fun to watch.
Wow. Yeah, I'm excited to see that unfold. So for you, you were highly recruited, obviously, for football, just like we talked about, looking at going to LSU. But then you were drafted 5th overall out of high school. What was the decision like to go the baseball route? Did you still have more of a love for baseball, or was it just like, wow, I'm about to get a big fat signing bonus. I'm 18, like I'm going to go that way?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed baseball, and I was probably 50-50 when it was baseball season. I really loved it. I just think, the opportunity that presented itself at that time when I'm 18 years old was, first round signing bonus, big league call-ups, 40-man roster, spring training invite, all those types of things. My agent, Jeff Morad, who's in Newport Beach, and that's how I ended up in California, Lee Steinberg and Jeff Morad, they're the ones that engineered that for me to where I got drafted by Wayne Huizinga, who was the owner of a new franchise, the Florida Marlins, where they didn't have any real prospects coming up through the ranks, where I knew I could get to the big leagues fast. And I said, I can't pass that up. So it was a culmination of really a lot of little things that made me say, I'll go play baseball first. And then if I ever want to, I'll go back and play football.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, because the stat I saw was that only 0.5, so 0.5% of people that go through the minors make it to the pros. But I was going to ask you like, kind of what that process was like. But yeah, it seems like you saw an easier path. But because they drafted you high, did they like kind of move you along quicker, or what was that process like?
Yeah, they did. I always played good defense, and that really helped me because that's half of it. Offensively, I struggled early on with a wood bat, and they put me in leagues with older players. And, small school Louisiana to the big leagues in 2 years, it was very tough. But it was fun, and it was a challenge. But, man, it was a grind, And my brother ended up going to LSU. He was 3 years younger than me. And when he ended up going to LSU, I really wanted to play football again because the struggle in the minor leagues was real. I was going up and down, and I was in AAA, big leagues, AA, AAA, big leagues, and then back down to AAA. And anyways, I just kind of, after a few years of it, I was like, man, I want to go back and play football really bad. My brother was a starting receiver at LSU. And I figured I could try to go help LSU, and I wanted to see if I could do it anyways. It was just another challenge.
Gotcha. To you, it kind of felt like, did you feel like you already achieved one path, like you proved that you did make it to the big leagues and even was there for like a World Series thing, or did you just see the window closing for football and be like, man, if I'm going to do football, it's either now or never?
It was, I needed to go play football, I think, in order for me to be able to make it in football. I wanted to get drafted and go to the NFL. I mean, the day I set foot at LSU and got out of my baseball contract, all I was thinking about was, to prepare myself for the next level. And I had the pro mentality because I had been in the pros with baseball. So I understood, how to kind of gear myself, for dealing with all the things you'd have to deal with to be a quarterback at LSU and try to get to the NFL pretty much. So I chose a place where my brother was at, but they weren't great. They weren't a great football team back then. And so my first year, we really, really struggled, but I wanted to play football bad. I wanted to get out of that baseball environment. I was tired of it, and I wanted to go play football. I really had the bug.
Gotcha. So I guess seems like you used it as an advantage because you were basically, what it sounds like, treating college football as a minor league for NFL, which is basically what it was for you. Was there ever a moment where you were like sitting in class is like, being older than everybody and being like, damn,
Oh yeah,
I was just a professional baseball player. What am I doing? Do you ever have the
man,
fear of regret?
big time, and it was a weird dynamic, to be honest with you, because I hadn't been in a classroom in 4 or 5 years, and now I'm in an English 101 with a bunch of 19-year-old kids that probably couldn't do much math, to begin with, so, but they were easy classes, and I wanted, it sounds bad, but I wanted an easier schedule at the beginning because I knew I was fixing to put everything I had into learning the offense, watching film, getting to know the coaches, throwing with my receivers in the off season, the spring practice. I mean, it's a lot on these college kids, especially a quarterback at a major university, to try to come in and try to start right out the gate. And that's what I tried to do, and I was able to do it. But the classes were secondary.
Yeah, I bet. So your first year, you're talking about getting used to the systems and stuff, and you were only at LSU 2 years, and you had 2 different coaches. So your second year, this new head coach comes in by the name of Nick Saban, and your offensive coordinator was Jimbo Fisher, right?
Jimbo Fisher, yeah.
So first, is it true that Nick Saban only sleeps 3 hours a night? And second, what else did you learn from having Nick Saban as a coach that you maybe even still use today or teach your kids?
Yeah, I think he prepares you mentally and physically and emotionally for all that you're going to have to deal with. He's been at Alabama for a long time, and now he's won a bunch of championships, and he's the GOAT. He's the daddy now. But when he got to LSU, he wasn't, and we knew he was just a fiery guy that had spent some time in the NFL as a defensive coach with Belichick in Cleveland. We knew he, was at Michigan State and did a heck of a job there and got them to a bunch of bowl games, but he was unproven. He came in there with a big chip on his shoulder. He's not a very big guy. He's military, super. I guess the way he trains everybody as hard as he possibly can, and he's going to get the most out of you. And he coaches his coaches harder than he does his players. So it's from the top down. Like, he coached Jimbo just as hard as he coached me. And that's what was fun to see, is like we were all the same, really. I mean, Jimbo was calling plays, but Saban would get on him as hard as he'd get on me at practice. And so everybody's vulnerable under Saban. You know what I'm saying? You better have it together. And I think that's what drives a lot of his teams or his recruiting processes and everything that he's got, is he's coaching those coaches so hard that they got to do their job at a high level, and he gets the most out of everybody in the building, and that's what was fun to see.
Yeah, I've heard that same thing from people. So learn from him, and then your dad being a coach. Did you ever have any interest in coaching?
I like to train guys a little bit, like my kids and my nephew's a starting quarterback right now at Allen, Texas, in high school. I love to train the guys that I really, have an interest in. And it's not that I don't love kids, and I do train kids. I don't have a ton of extra time to be just out there training kids that really don't have a real mindset for the game or really want to make it to the next level. I don't have patience for that, to be honest with you. So I really like to work with kids that I know want this worse than anything and have the ability to do it. So, I've spoken at the Elite 11 camps. I've done all that stuff and spoke to kids all over in high schools. But I really like individual stuff with guys that really know what they're doing and want to make the most of their talent.
Gotcha. Yeah, especially if you're like a high school coach, you're gonna have a lot of players that aren't like that.
I know, especially in Newport.
Yeah, it's not. Football here is not quite the same as it is down in the South.
No, there's a lot of difference between Newport Harbor High and Allen, Texas. That's for sure.
Yeah. All right. So when you finished up your career at LSU, then you get drafted to the NFL. What was that draft day like? Because I know now it's like all glamorized of like where you are, like getting the phone call and all that stuff. But for you, it's like, oh man, I already been drafted, like been there, done that. Or was it still just as exciting or even more exciting?
Well, it was an exciting time of my life because you just don't know where you're going to, where you're going to get drafted and where you're going to end up living. I think anytime that you're up for anything like that in life where you're not real sure about where you're going, it's nerve-wracking. It's exciting. It's nerve-wracking. You're wondering, you're curious. I mean, who's going to draft me? I slipped to the 6th round, which I was really thinking that I was going to be a third rounder, to be honest. So I was drafted high in baseball. I was drafted low in the draft in football. So I've experienced both. And you know what I'm saying? I've experienced the call coming real early, and I've experienced sitting there going, twiddling my thumbs, going, what's going to happen? There's stories about draft day that I won't go into, but I thought I was going to get drafted in the 2nd or 3rd round by the Cowboys. Jerry Jones called me the night before the draft. That didn't happen. He drafted Quincy Carter instead of me in the 2nd round, so it just kind of blew my mind. And then I kept falling. And Holmgren ended up drafting me in the 6th round when he was in Seattle. And it was fun to go up there, but I ended up playing my rookie year in Cleveland because they wanted to put me on practice squad. They had brought in Dilfer and Hasselback in the offseason, and Holmgren wanted those 2 guys to compete for the starting job. So I was kind of behind the 8 ball. And, when you get drafted in the 6th round, you're going to be a backup anyways. I knew that. I just didn't know where it was going to be. I thought it'd be in Seattle, and I ended up being in Cleveland because they traded my rights away.
Interesting. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, getting drafted to be a backup, it's got to be a weird experience for you, to being like a superstar through high school. And it's not just you. I mean, anyone that gets to the NFL, they were a superstar probably most in high school and college. And then you get to the point where you're like carrying the clipboard on the side. Like, what was that experience like?
Man, 3 years in Cleveland, I did it. And I kind of have, I don't want to say ADD, but I like to play. Like, I don't like to sit around.
Yeah.
And I think you got to be motivated. I think most athletes, are super motivated to be on the field, or they wouldn't be there to begin with. And so there wasn't a real challenge week in, week out. For me, it was in practice going against the first team as the backups. You know what I'm saying? So,
yeah,
I got my reps in practice. I tried to make the most of it. But on Sundays, it was very tough to sit over there on the sideline and watch. But my teammates are great. Tim Couch was a starter there in Cleveland when I was there for 3 years. I supported him. I love him to death. He's one of my best buddies. But as an athlete, you still want to play. So I was hoping that I would have good preseasons or something would happen. But our whole coaching staff got fired and we all got released. And it was a tough situation in Cleveland there for a few years.
I mean, it's been a tough situation there for more than a few years.
For many years. For me, for 3 years.
Yeah, you're not the only quarterback that didn't have an ideal situation there.
No, they've gone through a lot of them. Probably 20 in the last 20 years. It's crazy.
Yeah. So was that kind of frustrating experience of not playing on Sundays? Is that what made you walk away, or was there something else?
No, I wanted to stay in the league, but when it's time for you to get another contract, get that second contract, if you hadn't played and started,
yeah,
because of the way salaries work, you have to make a lot more based on the years of service. And so they can bring in another rookie, and I'm a 3rd or 4th year guy. They got to pay me double. So it's really salary cap stuff. And then it becomes a financial situation. And then, I hadn't started a game in the NFL either. So that's very difficult because they're like, well, this, rookie is 22. I'm 28, 29 at that point, because I played baseball and come back. That's very tough to stick in the league. And Lane Kiffin gave me a shot in Oakland in 2007, and Jamarcus was there. And then it was last year of Al Davis's life, actually. And Al Davis, legendary owner, the Raiders, brought me in, signed me. I was his backup. I was actually going to be the 3 behind Jamarcus, who got drafted first, and Andrew Walter, sorry. And Jamarcus wasn't ready to play the first game of the season. So Al Davis freaked and went and got Dante Culpepper and ended up releasing me like the week before the season. I thought I was going to be there for 3 or 4 years at least. And so that happened, at the end of my NFL career, but it was fun. I mean, I got a chance to be around Lane and all that. And he was at SC with my brother. So that was fun, but I would have loved to stay in the league for longer. Yeah.
Thanks. Wait, so what was the gap between leaving the Browns and then going to the Raiders?
It was like 2 years where I didn't do anything but train. And then I was throwing pro day at SC when my brother and Leinert and all them were there, Reggie Bush. and they couldn't throw. They didn't have a quarterback, so I threw pro day to like Dwayne Jarrett and Steve Smith, two guys that were awesome. And so Lane Kiffin was out there watching them, and they had a bunch of scouts out there. And Lane's like, I need a backup. I need another backup on the roster. And I said, well, bring me up there. And so I ended up working out with the Raiders with like 5 other quarterbacks that they brought in, and I won that little, I guess that little trial thing that they did that day, that little quarterback competition they had that day to sign a guy, and I won that competition. So, they signed me. So I was happy and thought I was going to be back in the league, which was pretty surprising. But I'd set out for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, that's crazy. It seems like you almost got a really, really lucky break, but still pretty cool to get back in the game. But then after that, then you're probably thinking like, okay, yeah, I guess my sports career is over. But then you fast forward like 6 years later, and MLB Network has this little contest to get you kind of back in it. Can you tell me about what that was, like the contest for the best knuckleballer, or what was that?
Yeah, this story kind of ends the same way, but yeah, I got a call from Major League Baseball Network, and R.A. Dickey had just won the Cy Young. And it was the first time a knuckleballer had ever won the Cy Young. So they wanted to do a reality show like on the Golf Channel, where they do, reality competitions and all that. So they had never done one before. They're like, we're going to bring in a bunch of former quarterbacks. So we're going to teach them how to throw the knuckleball. It's going to be fun to teach all these guys. We'll have Wakefield and Charlie Huff and all these guys coming in teaching you how to throw it. It's kind of a short motion when you throw a knuckleball. You don't really bring it all the way back. It's just a short push motion. Yeah, it's a push. And, there's a lot of elbow, and it's just a push. And it's kind of like a catcher or a quarterback. You sit back there and toss it, and you got to be fast or quick release, And so I said, yeah, man, I'll do it. So we all went and did this reality show, and I ended up winning the reality show. And then the Diamondbacks signed me because I won the reality show. So I got to go to camp with Arizona 15 years after I left the Marlins.
Jesus.
And now I'm pitching in the, big league camp against the Giants like 3 weeks later. And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm pitching against Bruce Bochy. They just won the World Series. And I've never been so nervous in my life, to be honest with you, when I was on the mound throwing a knuckleball against the Giants, because first of all, I didn't know I really hadn't thrown it very long. And then, it was working, and I can throw hard. Like I was throwing 89, 90 if I was throwing fastballs, but my knuckleball, I didn't know exactly if it was going to be a strike or a ball, and that was a tough situation for me because I didn't want to walk people, and it's such a different deal. It's a slow, patient deal, and I like throwing hard. So it worked against me a little bit, but I actually had that thing moving. I struck out. I don't know, I pitched 3 innings, 3 separate outings, and I struck out like 3 or 4 or 5 guys. Like, they weren't hitting it. I don't think the Diamondbacks wanted to have a knuckleball thrower in the climate that they're in in Arizona. It goes good in the humidity.
Why is that?
It cuts against the humidity. So like in New York or Florida or Houston, there's so much humidity in the air in the South, like Atlanta, that the ball it cuts up against the elements, the humidity. So if it's dry, the ball doesn't. If it's a dry climate, or the air is dry, it has less humidity, so it doesn't move as much. So all the knuckleballers that have ever been successful throw in a humid climate.
That makes sense, because I was thinking like the ball travels better off the bat when it's in those dry environments. So I guess
look at any knuckleballer's stats when they have to go play Colorado, Arizona, West Coast. They don't do good. Sometimes they'll sit them out because that ball won't move near as well in a dry climate.
Interesting. Okay, so that was your last pro experience athlete, like 6-7 years ago, but that was like the same gap between the Raiders. So is there still time for another comeback? Or are you going to give basketball a chance or something?
Man, I run hundreds. I run sprints like I'm still running for Saban, but I ain't no way, man. I mean, I'm over the hill now, but it's fun to watch these guys like Tom Brady, who of course, I played against back in the day. Drew Brees was in my draft. To watch these guys continue to play at a high level, and even if they're they're not the same as they were 2-3 years ago, and I think they're playing fine. But just for them to be playing at that level is pretty amazing. I know Rivers is the same way. Roethlisberger's come back this year strong. I love to watch those guys, those old school guys making plays and continuing to play. I feel like I could still play, but I don't think I'm gonna get that chance.
Yeah. Yeah, it is cool to see all the older guys still playing, but then it's like, man, there's only 32 starting jobs in the NFL, and when one guy holds on to it for 15, 20 years, man, it really makes it tough for those young guys to get their chance.
It does. It's just, and then, back when I was playing in the early 2000s or mid 2000s, I guess a lot of these teams went to 2 quarterbacks on their roster. And so that eliminated, I think 25 teams out of the 30 something, the 32 when I was in the league went to 2 quarterbacks. So it went from, there was 90 jobs to 75, whatever that is, a lot less, 70 jobs. So it was like, there's not many, there wasn't that many jobs out there. And if you hadn't played, then it's tough to stick around. Some guys get lucky, some guys don't. I mean, there's a lot of guys that got cut that can beat out guys that played for 15 years in the league. There's just, they just didn't get the chance.
Yeah. So which leads me to my last question. So looking back at your wild journey of everything you've been through, how much of your success or maybe even the lack of opportunity would you attribute to luck, and how much of that would you attribute to hard work?
Well, when I was a kid, man, that's all I did was play ball, and I listened and I retained information, and I really thought about it, and I dreamed about it, and I woke up thinking about it is 24/7. So a lot of kids would do vacations and they would go to the pool or the beach, I guess, in California or Florida. But, we didn't have that in Shreveport, man. That's all I thought about was trying to set, records or be all state or be all district when I was young, or, all those little things. It meant the world to me. So I know that propelled me to where I built a name for myself early on, which was good because I got those opportunities. I wish I was still playing. Like I said, it's very difficult. It's very difficult when you're trying to do 2 sports and not concentrating on one to make a real long, like super duper career out of it. And that's what I wanted to be, the first guy that ever played baseball at major leagues and the NFL at the same time at the quarterback position. That's what I dreamed about when I was a kid. And I felt like maybe I could pull it off, but it's just so hard because if you're the quarterback, it's first of all, it's hard to be the starter, but if you're a quarterback and play well, they don't want you leaving the facility and going to play another sport because you got to lead the team. You're the CEO of the organization. And when I was younger, I didn't understand that probably would never happen. And I probably would have just played football from the beginning.
Yeah. Was there any thought to play baseball when you were back at LSU, or was that already just focused on just football?
You can't, when you go play pro baseball.
Oh yeah, that's right.
You can't go back and play. So you lose your amateur status. So I couldn't have played college baseball. I would have loved to have an aluminum bat. I would have hit 50 home runs.
Was there any way to try and stay in the minors? I mean, you've seen some guys try and do college football in the minors at the same time.
Yeah, some of them have done it. I just wanted to give everything I had. I had given 4 years to baseball, and so I was going to give 1 full year to football and see how it went. And then because we struggled and then they hired Saban, I didn't have the luxury of leaving and then trying to come back. I had to be there to learn everything that I needed to learn, and I needed to prove that I could play, and I needed to win that starting job. There's a lot going on at LSU at that time with the new staff. So Saban wouldn't have wanted me to go back and play baseball and then come back. I wouldn't have been able to start, I don't think.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I appreciate you coming on, man. That was the end of the questions I had for you.
Awesome.
So last thing, just let the people know where they can find you on social media or anything else you got going on.
Sure. At Josh Booty 10. So at Josh Booty 10. You can find me on all social media and Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. And I post a lot about sports. I have a podcast on the Believe Podcast Network, which is out of LA. I cover the SEC, of course, LSU, Bama, Georgia, all those teams. It's fun to talk. And we always talk the national landscape too. So a lot of college football. Check us out on the Believe Podcast Network, which is BLEAV.
All right. I appreciate you. Josh Booty, everyone. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, man. Thanks for calling.
All right. And that's a show. Thanks for watching. We got a lot more interviews coming with some legendary guests that you're not going to want to miss. So go ahead and click that subscribe button. That way you see as soon as we release them.